Welcome to Barber Jabber with me, Gary Spencer. Today I'm talking to one of my good mates, it's Sid Sottung. He started out in New York, he then moved over to the UK. He's worked almost everywhere around the world. He runs a fantastic academy in Nottingham. He's got a great shop and business. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Okay, welcome Sid Sottung, my old friend, to Barber Jabber. Today we're going to be talking to you about your career and travelling from the States and all the things you've done, and a few of the ups and downs you've had as well. So listen, welcome. You're looking well. How are you?
I'm doing great, Gary. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here on Barber Jabber with the Great British Barber Bash.
Listen, let's go right. I mean, I've travelled with you quite a lot. You're one of the first people I worked with about 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago. But just to really take it back to basics, where did you first start? What got you first into the hair world?
Well, what happened was I started, I'm 45 years old, and I started at the age of 14 back in New York, where my mother suggested that I would get a job. And so, of course, because I was getting in with the wrong type of crowd, it just happens, And so what happened was, there was a local barbershop just around the corner, and they needed like an apprentice or a shop boy. And so as soon as I stepped into the barbershop, in a weird way, I felt like I was at home.
Yeah.
The only thing is, it was an Italian barbershop where they pretty much 90% of the time spoke Italian, and the youngest barber there was 60 years old.
Good. So experienced, we definitely experienced. What was it like? What was the type of clientele they'd have in that shop? Was it just your guys coming in was it half-hour appointments, or what was the general vibe?
No, it was more of like a walk-in center, like a walk-in type of clientele where people just hung around and just kind of really just, they had the espressos, the coffee. They would, at the time they would smoke inside the barbershop. And it was more like a meeting place, or, they would read the newspapers, they would play chess. And it was just kind of like more of like a hangout.
Yeah, it's more like a culture thing and sort of a community thing. So from there, I mean, I know that you ended up at Sassoon's as an educator, but what was the next sort of step along the path? How did you get into working in the education world and at Sassoon's and stuff?
Well, it's always been my, even when I was a young lad, I would always look at my teachers, and I would always wonder why I didn't see any passion out of them when they were teaching. But unfortunately, I have to show compassion here, that I could imagine being a teacher back in New York with a lot of delinquents and troublemakers, ruffians. It must have been very difficult teaching. And so maybe they were lacking the passion anymore. So it's always been my dream to one day to become a teacher. But what happened was, because I love my creativity, I love my fashion, I never thought how I can incorporate teaching into creativity. And for the grace of God, I'm very fortunate enough that I'm able to do that with barbering.
Yeah, cool. And did you sort of straight away from the barbershop you were working in get an opportunity to work at Sassoon's? How did that come about?
No, what I had to do with my journey, my mom then suggested that I might, be more, it might be a bit more safer or a nicer area to go into the hairdressing side of things. So I went to hair college at, it was called beauty school, and cute beauty school dropout music, and I went part time and to do my qualification, to do my training hours, to get my license. And what happened was I did that, but I never really truly liked that environment. I never really liked. I loved the women, of course. But I didn't like doing women's hair, really. I'll be very honest with you. And so what happened was, I then worked in a really posh hair salon, and I saw what was great about that was I saw high quality of service and the amount of money that could be made in that, and by having a higher standard, so everyone got shampooed. I mean, you had lovely coffees, lovely herbal teas. You had, some nights you might have a glass of wine, and for the clients. And it was just, I saw the whole different side of things. So then I then went on a trip with my staff that I was working with, and we we went to Canada to the Sassoon Academy up there, where I did my first Sassoon course, and I was blown away because I felt like I was at home because everyone that worked there had, crazy color hair, and this is, we're talking about back in the early '90s, and all the girls had short hair, really cool graphic fringes, and the way they taught, everyone interaction was, they were all passionate, and I realized that's who I want to work for, and because and at the time it was like known that that Sassoon are the best. Vidal Sassoon is the best. If you want to be the best, you go to Sassoon. And so I ended up applying at the Sassoon salon in New York City, downtown. And how it all happened was that I filled out, my friend got me an application, and I filled it out. And I was just so scared about turning it in. And my friend Jessica, she knew that I was like, I was nervous about it. And what happened was, I remember this day. It was a beautiful day. Sun was out. I was wearing my shorts, kind of my dress the way I'm now. And so I turned in my application because I had it on me. I had a messenger bag. And then the receptionist had said, well, listen, the manager's, for some reason, she doesn't have an appointment right now, like a client. She could see you now. And I was like, I was so scared. And my friend just pushed me. I remember her, and she was really tiny, my friend Jessica. She actually pushed me, and I was like, oh, yeah. And then what happened was, the manager's name was Olga, and she sat me down, and I was like the whole time, I'm like, I'm so sorry for the way I'm dressed right now. I was not expecting this interview. I'm so sorry. And I was apologizing like 10 times, and she finally had said, listen, just relax. It's okay. We understand. And she goes, why do you want to work for Sassoon? And I said, because I want to be the best. And that was it. So I was, especially in my younger years, up until I was about 38, I was a really, really cocky bastard. All I cared about was becoming the best. All I wanted to was for myself, not for anyone else. And,
yeah. Well, then again, you need that drive and that something inside you to drive you on to attain those high standards, I suppose.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think it's kind of my own worst enemy, because I've been doing hair for about 31 years now, and I'm not happy with what I do. I always criticize. I always hate my haircuts. I hate the way I talk. I hate my accent. I hate, you start thinking about these negative things. And that's why I'm always constantly, I feel like I'm overdoing it,
Yeah.
Whenever I do something, it has to be above and beyond.
Constant development, isn't it? Constant development. I think we're all guilty of that to a certain extent, aren't we? With haircuts, that we just constantly think, what could he have done better all the time? Oh, yeah. Who were the guys at Sassoon's that the big names that you got to work with? I know that you worked with Annie Humphreys and some of the other icons.
So I was very, very fortunate enough to be able to work with my icons and a lot of people that Gary, as well. There was, of course, Annie Humphreys, who's pretty much the
legend.
Yeah, she is an iconic legend. She basically invented all the hair coloring techniques that people use today. And of course, Tim Hartley, who was the international creative director at the time. And I was able to go my very first time I ever went on stage. The very first time, I didn't have any teaching experience, no demonstration experience. The first show I did was with Annie Humphreys and Tim Hartley on stage. And
brilliant.
And what happens? What do I do? First thing I get up on stage, I drop my.
You cut yourself.
There was 150 people there, and I remember that. And then, of course, I've worked with Mark Hayes. I've worked with a very famous education team called M&P with a gentleman called J.B. Mazzella, and I was able to work with him. My art director at the time, there was a couple art directors. I had three main art directors in New York. I had a woman called Young Hee, who she was a Korean woman. Oh my God, she was so serene and so calm. And then I was very fortunate enough. I was able to work with a gentleman called Avram, and he was the editorial director for Sassoon, and he was a legend. I mean, he did Alexander McQueen's very first show, I think, out of St. Martin's, and he was iconic, you know. And the way he looked like a vampire, but with like Nike trainers on, it was brilliant. Then I'd have to say the one person that really inspired me was the man called Cristiano, who was he now works for Paul Mitchell Products in America, and he's from Venice, Italy. And he taught me about art, fashion, you know, about flicking the scissors and about precision. So I'm so grateful that in New York at the time, I was able to work with these individuals. And I've worked with many amazing barbers from Sassoon as well, where they taught me above and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I think nowadays, with obviously there has been a massive change in barbering over the last sort of 5 to 6 years, and people have got much more into sectioning and technique. I do believe that the technique is fantastic at the moment, but it all sort of stems from those Sassoon type cuts and those tiny sections we were taught to take in the 80s and 90s. Do you think that it had like a real massive effect on your approach to cutting hair?
Oh, of course. Sassoon, there was the two moments in my life that I remember in my career was the day I joined Sassoon and the day I left Sassoon. It was because the day I joined, that was the day I ventured into a new world of having a strong foundation of cutting hair. And of course, high standards, where the standards they taught me or shared with me, I mean, it was the best decision in my life. It was very extreme standards, I'd have to honestly say, because that was the old school Sassoon, where everything was done at a very extreme level, where there were times I thought I was going to break.
They used to make all their assistants cry, didn't they? They used to make you cry or something. You know, it was that intense, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there were days when if I got a haircut wrong, I remember, especially in New York, I would go into the toilet and I would bang my head against the tile walls in the toilet because I was so upset I screwed up or I got a few hairs that was wrong in the haircut. Yeah. And I remember that, you know, but that was part of my training. That was part of
the foundation.
Yeah, it made me
part of the foundation. So that was New York you were in. Was it LA? Did you go to LA after that, or where did that come into the mix?
Well, so I then got transferred out to LA, where I became a full-time educator at their Santa Monica Academy, and which I'm so grateful for. That's where I learned how to become a teacher. Because my mentor, his name is John Guest, and I worked with Tracy and Julian. They were original, and Sally Rogerson. They were the original art directors of the academy there. And an amazing colorist called Lucas, who was one of my close friends. And John Guest was my main mentor, and he took me under his wing. And he's the one that was able to teach me how to teach, because I went through a very intense training program on how to become a teacher at Sassoon, where we learned presentation skills, how to work on stage with multiple people on stage, and how to really support the team. And And I know, I think there is a lot, and I'm sure we're going to discuss this, about the differences between just being a barber who does one-day courses or that just goes on stage. You know, to me personally, it's amazing, Gary, what you do is by giving these young people opportunity to go on stage at the barber bashes. And that's why I feel it's my responsibility to do training with them maybe prior to help them what their expectations, what to expect, and their expectations of how to actually teach to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between somebody who can cut hair and somebody who can educate. And to be honest with you, there is a really high standard in the barbering now, and some of the young guys can cut hair fantastically well. It doesn't always mean that they can present very well. Would you agree?
Exactly. It definitely takes some skill. You have to really, whenever I go on stage, a couple of little things I would recommend for any of these young barbers that want to go on stage. You have to realize You have to get out of your mindset that you're doing it all about you. The key thing is there's going to be a young barber in that audience that wants to learn. And you have to then make that decision. Is it about your ego, or is it about sharing your knowledge to help maybe that one person, you know? The other advice I would give to any of these young barbers, the secret that I do is you need to be able to describe what you're doing on stage to anyone in that audience. And that could be the most experienced barber in the room, the junior barber, the janitor, the one that serves the drinks, the one that's taking the pictures. And that is my trick.
That's the key.
That I excel in, is to be able to explain exactly what you're doing to a live audience and to make sure everyone in that room understands what you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I would remind you on that one, actually, we did Barber Connect probably 5 years ago, and you did a great job. You were on my little stand that I'd been given by the guys at Barber Connect. And I'd probably told you this before. There was a guy in the audience, and I remember him because he's got a really distinct look. He's called Sam Massey, and he worked for the Slicks guys in Glasgow. And he said to me afterwards, I can't believe I was watching Sid. And then I think he came to a workshop. And then luckily enough, we got him on stage with you. I think it was Glasgow the year before last. So we'd gone from watching you in the audience and being like overwhelmed because he just started. Like, wow, that was fantastic. And then now we'd given the opportunity to work alongside you. So I think it's fantastic when we can do that. And that's one of the things with the Barber Bash. It's about including people. It's not a situation where nobody can get involved. We want to include new people and bring them through. Sorry. When did you?
That's what I think is great about you, Gary, is that you give these young people such an amazing opportunity to showcase their talent, their skills, and then to help develop them. So then they might start off in a demonstration area at a product stand, but then they evolve and are going up on the main stage. And they could be working on the main stage with myself or Ryan Cullen. It could be some amazing barbers that are some of my icons as well.
Yeah, definitely. As I say, I would also say at that point, it's not for everybody. A lot of people think, I want to do that. And then when they get to doing it, there is a lot of pressure beforehand. You might even get a lot of criticism afterwards as well. Sometimes the people watching can critique you as well, and people sometimes can't take that. So it doesn't suit everybody, But I think if you want to do it, push yourself, network to get your sort of self-known, send messages to us, send messages to you, and hopefully you can move forward. How did you end up coming to the UK? Because LA seems so fantastic to us English people, and New York, we think, wow, that is ultra glamour. So why the UK and why Nottingham?
Okay, so I had then got a job transfer to the Advanced Academy for Sassoon in London, where for me personally, at the time, London was the key hub of creativity of cutting hair. And so, of course, like I said, I was still a little young, cocky little person, and I wanted to do the best, but I think that's the main reason that I tell myself. But realistically, I think I was it's called doing a geographic, because I think internally I was hating my life. I was hating myself. And then for me, I thought I'd fix all my problems by moving somewhere else.
By moving away. Loads of people think that, don't they? And what they realise when they get there is it's just a different location, isn't it,
Exactly. And so my problem still came with me. And so what happened was my first wife, she had gone to, she was doing a master's degree at Trent University, which is based in Nottingham. And so when I left Sassoon, I then moved up to Nottingham. And for me, I absolutely love Nottingham because it's like a rock and roll city. They have a lot of venues for music. The people here are really down to earth and straight and very honest and straight. It's in the middle of the country, so it's easier for when I do my traveling. It's close enough to airports, and and I'm able to have my businesses here where they don't have the London price tag or the overheads.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody who doesn't know Nottingham, is it true? Is Nottingham the place where the females outnumber the males or something? Is that true about Nottingham?
It's about like 6 to 1. So especially in the universities and everything, yeah, it's quite.
Yeah. So it's quite cool. Now, listen, I do know that you struggled a little bit and you had some down sort of situations with your life, and maybe you got into drinking a bit too much. Tell us a little bit about that stage of your life. Or was that something you always had that you sort of needed to overcome to get to where you are?
Yeah, definitely. Like I was saying before, like when I talked about me being a young person and being very cocky, and all I cared about was myself. That was the big problem. Because I'm actually a recovered alcoholic and also drug addict, and I was doing literally alcohol and cocaine and whatever drugs I could get my hand on every day until about the age of 38. And so what happened was I lost. I only had at my darkest time, the year before I got sober, I lost half my body weight. I was ending up in jail, like jail cells. I was I had
just like drunken disorderly kind of stuff, and
yeah, just stupid stuff. And then I only had 10 teeth in my mouth. I lost every will I had. I was pretty much almost bankrupt. I was about 25 grand in debt. I lost the will to live. I'll be honest with you. And I just one day I woke up, from a bender or from a drug,
weekend, yeah.
I just realized I don't want this anymore. And of course, I did what was suggested. I approached a couple. I can't really name them because you're not really supposed to. But I approached a couple of self-help type of places, organizations, and I started to get my life back on track. And I have a very strong belief in God. And I'm not scared to say that anymore. In America, you might hear all the barbers in America talk about God. It's quite common in America, but as opposed to England. But I'm not ashamed to let everyone know that I have a very strong relationship with God in my life.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of people, even me, I've had times where I probably drank too much and done all things that I shouldn't have done. But now, personally, I actually packed in drinking myself about 3 years ago, then drank a little bit more and stopped drinking again this year. And do you know what? It makes my life have so much more clarity. Especially when we're doing things like people look at you and they look at your international travel and the way you run your academy and the shows you go to. And I think people do think at first that it's a bit of fun and, all the drinking, etc., is also included in that. And you soon realize it makes life more difficult if that's involved, doesn't it,
I couldn't do all that I do if I was drinking. I mean, this all happened, all this international travel, opening up all my barbershops, my academies, my product ranges that we'll, talk about, is that I could not have done this if I was still drinking.
No.
When I was drinking and using drugs, all I cared about was like someone handed me a bunch of money to fix my life. So I had to fix myself first before all that money came that I worked for, and that I I mean, I had to work for everything I have in the last 7 years. I had to work hard for this, and only because I had to change my life.
Yeah, I mean, it always reminds me. I watched an interview with Samuel L. Jackson, and he basically was the same. He done exactly what you're talking about until he was 40 or 45 or whatever it was, and basically he said he could hardly remember half of the interviews he went to for some of the films. And then as soon as he hit, I think it was Pulp Fiction when he was about 40, or all of a sudden he's become this mega global star. He plays golf and he's got a totally clean life. And he just says, well, he now enjoys life so much more, It was just a blur. The first 45 years was a blur. So listen, on that, you then started your shop which I came to in Nottingham. It was a small shop. That was probably the start of the rebuild and the rebirth of you, really, because you'd had, the times in the States, you'd hit your low, and then we were rebuilding to where we are now. So tell us how that started, that journey.
Okay, so what had happened was that when I got myself sober, about a month later, I was going through detox myself. I was having the shakes. I couldn't sleep at night during that whole period. I was working on myself. What happened was I had walked into Nottingham City Centre and I went down this small street, and which I never really remember going down. And what happened was when I went on there, I went down this small street and there was a for rent sign. And something I felt like, it's like, it's weird. It's like, like when you feel like you're being pushed somewhere. But
Something's drawing you in.
yeah, and
I normally get it with cake donut shops.
oh, I get it with my little fruit juices sometimes. I go crazy. Um, and what happened was, so I'm staring at this shop, outside. I'm looking at the front sign, thinking, oh, and then all of a sudden, the next door neighbor appears who has a shop next door, and he's like, oh, let me tell you about this shop. And I'm like, okay. And the next day, I signed the lease. And
Yeah.
the whole thing is, I'm walking out of there with the keys in my hand, thinking, what the,
Yeah.
because it's like, how am I supposed to pay for this? I mean, the rent was like, I think it was like £270 a month. Um, and I was thinking to myself, how am I supposed to pay for this? I'm 25 grand in debt. Um, I'm starting to change my life around, getting sober. I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to do this? And so what happened was, I actually had a lot of the furniture and stuff myself, and I just managed to make it happen. And what happened was, the only thing was, I had to do everything myself. So I was working 16-hour days. So I had to do the cleaning, I had to do the setting up, I had to teach the classes, I had to um, clean up afterwards, I had to do all the bookings of the courses, like admin work, which I was very bad at, and office stuff, which I hate. And then I had to do the ordering of the products and all the equipment I needed. And then I had to stay sober, meaning so I had to still go to my self help meetings. And I was honestly, it was to a point where like I would get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I wouldn't get home from work until probably maybe like sometimes 10 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock, and but then redo everything. And I was working every day, and
Yeah.
and I think I really do feel that work really helped me stay sober, especially for the first year.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, do you feel that because you had to go and put that effort in, a bit like I feel I did when we started the Barber Bash, I was doing everything on a shoestring, and Nikki and I basically run everything ourselves, before we had the luxury of sponsors and stuff. But do you think that made you feel like you gave it even more value and you appreciated it more because it took so much hard work?
Oh yeah, definitely. It also gave me a very strong grounding and also foundation for what um, I say to my staff. Um, Listen, guys, I always kind of remind them, listen, you have to work hard because, and I tell them my story. I'm like, listen, I did everyone's job here myself, so anything's capable. If you put your mind to it, you can make this happen. So, don't give up. Just got to put, the hard work and the hard grafting, and you can make this happen. And it's a very strong concept we have internally at my academy in Nottingham.
Yeah. How did I mean, I actually came to the opening when you expanded. I mean, how soon after that did you expand into the large academy that you moved into? And how did that come about?
Yeah. So what happened was after 8 months of starting my own business, I paid off all my debt. Um, and I was getting my courses were like 3 months booked in advance. And remember, I was doing everything myself, so I was getting a little bit it was getting too small in my small shop. And what happened was I decided that at that point. What happened was, so I met my wife who had a shop, two shops next door, and what happened was she knew the landlord that had the shop on the corner that was a lot bigger than my place. It was like 5 times the size, had 2 floors, blah, blah, blah. And so he said to me, and it was really bad, in a bad state. He's like, "Oh, if I fix everything, I could have it." And so I could have, sign a 5-year lease, and I have to fix everything. So I pretty much invested about 40 grand into it over the years, and it really was fulfilling because it was like my dream location, and it was starting to pick up in the area. But now I've actually moved on. So I actually now moved on. I have my new academy, which is pretty much, I'd say, probably about 3 times the size of that. My second
Yeah.
academy. I moved to a much bigger location where it has air conditioning, it has central heating, it's got 9 barber chairs downstairs, plus a reception area, plus retail, plus it's got we have 4 backwashes. It's got the kitchen, storage, and then there's the upstairs part as well, which is another part where we have like 7, 8 more stations there with more backwashes.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
it's got electric shutters. It's got private parking that we have, and also there's better places to eat around everywhere. So it's amazing, though. I mean,
Yeah. And how do you? I mean, how many people come on your courses, and how many models do you have to find?
I'd say probably about within a year, we probably have about around 200 students come through our doors. And because we offer from MVQ, apprenticeship programs, we also do short-term courses, like it could be 1 or 2 day courses, and also 5-day, 4-week courses, 10-week. So we have a wide range of courses, and we also host seminars there as well. And so with that, so to getting the models, because we provide live models for courses. And,
Yeah.
So I'd say probably between 300 to 500 models per month.
Oh my God. And again, now you've moved on. Obviously, you were doing everything yourself. Who helps you with all that now? Do you have a team behind you that works alongside you?
Yeah, so I have an amazing team. So I have so throughout the years, my team got a little bit too big for me because I'm a very hands-on. I like to be there and support and nurture the staff. So my team is now a little bit smaller. So the first person would be my academy manager. His name's Ian, and he's not a barber or a hairdresser. He's actually like an ex-pub manager. That's how I know him. And so he takes care of booking the models and like doing the admin, the booking of the courses, answering the phones. So he's like definitely my right hand man in the running of the business. So I also have a senior educator. His name is Matthew Fleetwood, and I've nurtured him for the last 7 years. So he came on to my courses as a beginner. And so now, he works for me as an educator, and he's absolutely brilliant. I'm so proud of him. He just recently became a Ruzel ambassador for the UK.
Yeah.
Such a great honor because he went to, he went to Schoolroom where he did the training, and then he was accepted for that role, and which is absolutely amazing. My other staff, so we also have head of the MVQ and also my color program, the head of the color department. Her name is Gusta. And so she's like the hairdresser at the group, even though she does do barbering, but she's more of the hairdresser. So she does really focusing on the health and safety with the learners and the shampooing and all that stuff. And so she's amazing. So she takes care of a lot of like, she's like quite a whiz with the computer and also designing things. So she handles that. There's also we also have Kieran, who is he's cut your hair before.
That's the guy. Yeah, great haircut.
And today's his birthday, by the way.
Ah, happy birthday, Kieran.
Give him a shout out. He started with me. He's now I think 19 now. So he started at 15 with me, and he's an amazing barber, and he's like kind of like a junior educator. So we're training him for education. So he's absolutely amazing, and he's so humble and he's so nice. he's like, all my staff are like extraordinary nice people. And but the last person I have is I have my apprentice. His name is Anton, and we call him Anton, the serious assistant, because he's so serious. You know, I mean, I have to crack jokes with him just to lighten him up, but he's so determined.
Focused.
He's so focused. He reminds, like, every one of them reminds me a little bit about myself. And Anton is really, I like him a lot. He's such a great pleasure. I mean, he's only like, I think 17 or 16, and he's such a hard worker. Like, I mean, I know it was so funny. I've got to tell you a story. When we were told we had to go into lockdown, he said, Sid, he's like, can I still come to work? I was like, no, Anton, you can't come to work. He's like, well, how about for cleaning? Can I come in here to clean up the academy? I was like, he's like, well, if you lock the door, you know, I'm like, no, Anton, you can't work. No, we can't have anyone here. You know, you can't work. So it was like, I had to sit down and give him a chat saying, listen, I had to tell him about the whole thing of what lockdown, the purpose of it is. And like, listen, you can't
just chill, watch Netflix.
Exactly. And he's such a, like, all my staff are so determined to make, and it's such an amazing experience for all the students that come on our courses, you know. So I'm so proud of them. Like, honestly, they're my family. I'm so
brilliant. Listen, I was going to ask you as well, we're going to talk a little bit about product in a minute. We've got about another 10, 15 minutes to go. What would be, what advice would you give to somebody new coming into the industry? You know, you're talking there about Anton. We see a lot of people going on courses and thinking there's a complete article after a few weeks. And, you know, what are the criteria that you would say are the things to make the magic ingredients for a young barber?
Definitely, I think the key thing is for a young barber is that it's all about progress, not perfection. Meaning they need to develop, and that it has to take time, you know, and experience. And that's the one thing I can't teach someone's experience. I can share with them my experiences. I can't teach them that. So what they have to realize, it's all baby steps until success. But the thing is about success is that marker of success keeps on moving. And so that means they keep on having to do those baby steps to reach it. So if they tell themselves to have short-term goals, such as sectioning or blow drying, or, you know what, maintaining a client base in the barbershop, then that's one big step getting closer to that success they want. You know, I see a lot of barbers, and they all different ages, and they want to do what I do. But the only thing is, it took me 31 years, you know, to get to this point.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you have to understand, what they have to understand is I am a complete obsessed about barbering and hair and about
for 31 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually really mental. My wife hates me being like this, but this is who I am. And the thing is, it's about creating that obsession where then it doesn't seem like work or hard work. You know, my best advice to a barber, you will get there, but you got to, one, work hard for it, and you have to really take it for what barbering is to make people feel great about themselves and to always share your knowledge. And then that's how you're going to grow.
Yeah, well said, mate. I mean, I remember we traveled quite a lot together, but we went to Jersey together, and we just talked about the industry for like 3 days or 2 or 3 days, didn't we? Yeah. And that's, you know, we're both a bit obsessive, I suppose, but it's becomes like people might look at that and think, oh, how boring is it talking about your job? But it's not. It's so interesting, and there's always things changing in it, and you know, so many different factors to it. I know that you've sort of expanded and got a few more shops in the last year or so, and that's something I think's been a goal for you. And I think you've even got plans to do more with the shops. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, with that journey, what happened was there was a man called Barry Stephen, who was a famous hairdresser in Leicester. And because
I've heard of him. I know him quite well.
Yeah, he would send me his staff and to train for barbering. And so one day he called me and said, would I like to start a barbershop together with him? So I was like, okay, let me come down to Leicester and to check it out. And yeah, so that was last November. And by December, we had our first barbershop. We had our second barbershop by, I believe it was going towards, off the top of my head, February, the first week of February. So then we were scheduled to have a meeting with a famous store to have a barbershop inside in March. But we were having meetings, and we were scheduled to do to go forward with getting everything ready. But of course, the whole COVID virus and lockdown, so we had to put a hold on that. But
Yeah.
so we have the Sid Sottung barbershops. So there's two of them, and I'm very grateful because all the staff have been trained by me or at my academy, and so that's how I hire my staff, because I need to get to know them. I also need to make sure that the standards are set high in place right from the beginning.
Brilliant, brilliant. And do you see, obviously you're going to look at this new one in Birmingham. I think I know where it's going to be, in that beautiful department store area. And again, could there be more after that, do you think? Do you think you could unravel that across the country, or?
Yeah, I would like to be honest with you. Is because the funny thing is, it's not so much because of for my ego or for that. No, because what happens is, as Gary, as you know, as we get older, we start thinking about our retirement years. And so I have to think about more like a long-term plan. That's why by having, sorting out, even though these barbershops are company owned, eventually I'll be able to hopefully maybe franchise the concept out, where then, I could then think about more for other bigger projects that I'm going into this year and next year.
Yeah. On that subject, one thing that I did want to speak before we finish off in about 10 minutes, product lines. People always say to me, how do you get your own products? And I know this is something you've been looking into. I know you've done some collaborations and stuff. So tell us a bit about the products that you're working on.
Yeah, so of course I have my range with Captain Fawcett's for beard oil and pre-shave oil and mustache wax and beard balm and cologne. So that was a collaboration it's called Barbarism, which I would never put my name to something if it wasn't amazing. And even though of course I don't have a beard, the product itself I love it. It actually works. Which at first, I was thinking, oh, what's the hype? But I gave it to one guy and it totally changed his beard. And that's why
my wife loved it on her beard as well. My wife uses it on her beard. I'm joking.
I'll make sure I'll check with Nikki next time I speak to her. And you know what? It's amazing to be able to work with Captain Fawcett because they're British owned, and Richie's such the most wonderful guy.
He's a character.
Oh yeah, and that's what I love about it because I know you're a character, I'm a character. We like characters,
Yeah.
So for myself at this point as well, so I do work as an ambassador for a lot of other brands, and for me, eventually, I would like to have my own product range. But the one thing is, I just want to clarify to the barbers out there. So when you want to have your own range, now the best thing to do is start off with a white label range, which is pretty much a pre-done range. Where they do is they just slap your logo on the bottle, and that's it. There's a lot of famous barbers actually have that, so it's a great way to spread your name to your clientele, and it gives a bit more added value to your barbershop and also with branding. So you have that option. Then, there's a second option, which is actually going to a proper professional range. Now, I'm going to give you the insight to it. Now, what you have to realize is that one product can easily take a couple years to develop, because how it works is that you have to give a couple ideas of sample products to the manufacturer, and they'll say, okay, you tell them what you want, and they take that concept and then they send you a sample. All right, they might send you a few samples because in order to get that product exactly the way you want it, so that might take 5, sometimes 10 times. And remember, posting it back and forth, and sometimes the company's too busy. It might take a couple months before you get a new sample. Then you have to work on the fragrance. Now, if it's a big manufacturer, then what would happen is they'll have their own fragrance house inside the laboratories, which is a little bit more easier. But otherwise, you then have to go to a fragrance house, and that's when they'll have 8,000 fragrances that you need to explain to them what type of fragrance. Then you have to do the whole sampling thing. So
Yeah.
then you have the product. But what happens is you have to go through mandatory testing. Yes. So that'll be to test for shelf life. You have to put basically in a special oven that tests for a 12-month shelf life in 3 months. So mandatory. You can't get past it. And then, of any other EU regulations. So, and this is just for one product. Yeah.
So it's not an easy. It's not going to happen overnight.
And also, when you talk about manufacturing in this level, we're talking about pretty much the MOQ, or the minimum order quantity, would be pretty much about 5,000 units per product. So if you have 4 products in your range, you're talking about 20,000 products. You then have to think about warehouse. You then have to think about delivery, everything. You can think, when you think about the packaging as well. Oh, I forgot to mention, you don't get the packaging from the manufacturer. They just make the product itself. So you then have to source out the bottles, the caps, the labels. Yes. So
it's not easy. It's not easy. But maybe a collab, like you're saying, a white label.
I'm sorry?
Maybe a white label, if somebody was not wanting to go as deep into it as that, maybe a white label might be the way to start to get your branding.
Definitely. I would strongly recommend for the young barbers that just want to get a product with their name on it. I would say starting off the white label range. Like I said, there's a lot of famous barbers that already do that, and that's a great way to sell product, possibly
and brand
within their barbershop. So.
Excellent. Right, listen, we're nearly at the end. One last main question for you. I know you've been talking to me about a book that you're looking at bringing out. What's that going to be about? Is it going to be Sid's life story?
No, not at all, actually. It's actually a dream come true for me. It's called The Art of Barbering, and it's actually a barbering training manual. But it's going to be for international audience. It's actually over 300 plus pages of step-by-step tutorials. It's got interviews from famous barbers, education managers, photographers from around the world. And it's going to go through everything. So it's kind of could be almost like an MVQ cosmetology book, but a lot more modern, because we have wet shaving, beard design, head shaving, men's hair coloring as well, long hair, scissor work type styles, and of course fading. And also clipper knowledge, talking about face shapes, head shapes, talking about body positioning, hand positioning. It's all the lectures, everything that we do on our courses is going to be going now into a big book. And it's going to be hardcover as well, so it's going to last forever. Yes.
Brilliant. Well, listen, we're nearly right at the end. I'm going to ask you, actually, I'm putting you on the spot here. I want to organise a couple of dates with you to do maybe Manchester or Glasgow, sort of October time when this lockdown's over. If people want to get hold of you, obviously you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, you've got your Sid Sottung website that they can contact you for courses. If anybody wants any questions, please hit me up, and I'm sure, Sid, you'd be happy with people that had any questions for you. I've really enjoyed that conversation, by the way. It's been absolutely fantastic. I love it that you've got so many facets to your career. There's been so many stories within the story. So I think it's inspirational as well how you've not had it easy necessarily. So thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you'd like to say just before we clock off?
I just want to say to all the barbers and hairdressers that are listening to this, we will get through this whole lockdown. And, remember, stay positive. And remember, you need to share your knowledge in order for yourself to grow. So definitely, when you see a beginner barber, don't knock them down, build them up. So keep positive.
Thank you very much, mate. One of my best mates in the industry. I appreciate that. And thanks for spending time with us today and sharing your knowledge and sharing your story. Thanks a lot, buddy, and take care. Cheers, mate.